Just a quick heads up before we get started. This video is just a follow-up to my previous theory video regarding kanepixels series, The Oldest View. So be sure to check out that original series and my previous video. Links will be in the description. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So in my previous video, we discussed my Phosgene theory, basically suggesting that what Wyatt encounters when he goes down the staircase that he finds is a bunker where he is then exposed to Phosgene gas and proceeds to hallucinate, eventually leading to his death. Now, for the most part, I like the theory. And I know reading the comments, for the most part, has been pretty positive. There's a lot of people that agree with me and a lot of people that don't agree with me, and that's cool. That was kind of the point of doing this, is I wanted to start conversation about it because I think the series is interesting, and this is just a way I thought I could do that. And in doing so, I've found some flaws in my theory, but I've also found other things that support it. I've also noticed that there's a lot of people making comments about certain parts of the theory, and I've come to realize very quickly that they either misunderstood something that I was saying or just maybe didn't watch to that point. Kind of hard to say, honestly. Comment section was all over the place, but I think it's probably pretty standard given how YouTube comment sections normally are. With that being said, I'm loving the discussion so far, and there's a lot of interesting things to go over. So I guess the first thing I want to go ahead and address is the camera footage. Now, this is something that keeps popping up in the comment section, and for the most part, I feel like it's a pretty fair concern. How is he experiencing a hallucination when he is filming it on his camera and has supposedly uploaded some of this footage? And I have a couple different responses for it. I had previously recorded one for the original video, but at the time I didn't feel as though I had put enough thought into it to really address it directly. But I've done some more thinking on it, and I think I have a couple different answers for that. One is pretty simple. It's a found footage film. Most found footage films stop being about the found footage pretty early on anyways. It's more to just add to the fear factor. The footage itself just acts as a way for the viewer to experience what's going on. It stops being literal and starts being almost like a set of eyes for the person watching it. So you could say that that's all it really does, and given how some of the shots in The Oldest View are filmed anyways, it kind of makes sense. After a while, the camera work becomes less like camera work and starts looking more like something done as a way to allow us to see through Wyatt's eyes. And I know with this work being done in Blender, it's also kind of literal, because whenever you animate scenes in Blender like this, you quite literally put them through a viewport. So it doesn't matter whether it's looking through the character's eyes or through a camera or through a lens, because as far as a literal recording sense when you're in Blender goes, it will always be through a lens. And I guess the other idea to touch on is that we don't know how much footage he's actually uploaded. I know he mentions it before going back the second time, but he doesn't show us what he's uploaded. He doesn't show us that he's interacted with anyone on it. He mentions going to see his old botany teacher, but doesn't make any mention of the footage or supposedly showing anyone else what he saw. The only other thing he's got going on as far as what he's uploaded is that he mentioned someone in his comment section suggesting getting some trail cameras and putting them up. But that doesn't really... It's only so useful given that the trail cameras are both sitting outside, and we're not sure whether they end up picking up anything anyways, because we never go back to them. So as far as that goes, we don't have any other camera location inside of the Valley View Mall. We don't really know what's being picked up at that point, or how much anyone else has seen. It seems odd to me that if he would upload all of that, including the mall, that the only thing anyone would suggest is to cover the outside. And that presents an issue, because if it is supposed to be found footage and he's uploaded some of it already, why has no one approached him about it? Why has he not spoken to anyone else about it? Surely, if there was an abandoned mall somewhere underground, somebody would come communicate with him on it. Whether it be a comment section blowing up with people trying to find it and explore, or a government entity, or somebody would surely come talk to him about it. So we don't even know what he's uploaded. Another thing to address is, if he was under the influence of Phosgene or some other gas causing him to hallucinate, why was he able to go home and upload footage and view that footage? Now, the thing to note is that with Phosgene specifically, it typically has a 48 to 72 hour kill time. So when you're exposed to it, it doesn't immediately leave your system when you go outside or like clear your lungs. It's residual. So while it makes sense that after a while, if he's not been exposed to a deadly dose of it, he would eventually be okay, or maybe even have some of the initial effects wear off, because while there is still long-term issues to deal with the exposure, like over a couple days, the initial effect could lessen. With Phosgene, there were some limited human testing trials done, and it was determined that while some people didn't experience immediate symptoms of exposure, even those who were exposed to a dose strong enough to kill but not outright immediately would sometimes be fine for a few days, or at least to them would be fine, only for a couple days later for a lot of these people to end up dying. So I don't find it impossible that he could have recorded this footage while hallucinating, and if he went back home right away and uploaded it, there's a good chance he'd have still seen what he hallucinated. This stuff lingers for days. And so while it's possible the effects might diminish over time, if he's done it same day and then he's coming back within a couple days, he's not likely to notice any kind of change. And it's very possible that the second time he's going there, before he's even back inside, that he's still hallucinating and suffering from it. One other thing to touch on with the camera work in general, and it's kind of a looser part of the theory, because I personally don't want to use it, but it was suggested to me, is that occasionally, whenever you're filming in environments with toxic chemicals or radioactive materials, that sometimes this radiation can affect electronic devices or cameras. You can cause things like ghosting or electronic failure in general. It can cause technical issues, and that might explain it. Honestly, that kind of feels like a cop-out to me, but I guess it's worth mentioning. I don't personally believe it, but there's an answer for you if you really want to go with it. Honestly, I don't think it matters. It's obvious from the way that it's been framed that after a while the camera work really doesn't matter, and part of this theory is to just have fun with it. I'm doing this because it's interesting to talk about. God forbid one part of the theory not make sense. I think most of it works, so having one part that doesn't really bother me that much. I wouldn't have made the video regarding it if I didn't think it was a fairly strong theory. With that being said, I don't want it to be accurate. I really don't. I think it'd be lame for it to be realistic. I'm just talking about it because I thought it was an interesting talking point. I think discussing Phosgene based off of that one line to start was a cool way to go about starting a discussion. And that's kind of how I want the rest of these videos to be. If I end up doing more, is like, it doesn't matter if the theory is realistic or just completely out there. The whole point is to have fun with it and to start a discussion with people that also find it interesting. And if you're out here watching this kind of content and you're not having fun with it, what's the point? And I guess if you really think about it as far as like hallucinations go, you could say that the way the camera work is being done is maybe more of a response or like a dreamlike state where he's basically just watching himself go through the mall, and the camera is like his way of doing so. Almost like when you're dreaming and you know that you're in the dream and you're moving through the dream, but you can't quite control it. You can only really sit there and watch it play out. So now that we've discussed some things that sort of hurt the theory, I'd like to move on and talk about some things that add to it and support it a little better, and maybe get a bit more in depth with some of my other talking points from the previous video. So one of the first things I want to go back and reinforce is how Wyatt would be able to hallucinate the Valley View Mall. Now, one thing to point out, and I actually just stumbled across this while filming today, but Caleb Finn released a video called The Buried Tragedy of the Oldest View, and I'll link that video here in the description. But in it, he points out that Wyatt recognizes the logo of the Valley View Center Mall on a sign that he's looking at, which is odd given that he's supposedly never been there. However, what Caleb Finn points out is that there's in fact another Valley View Mall in Roanoke, Virginia that shares a very similar logo. So if you wanted to go look at this theory and say he's remembering the other Valley View Mall, and it's kind of like bleeding in for him, because if he is hallucinating or he's in some kind of a dreamlike state, it would make sense that the two kind of blend together. Sometimes people do kind of have events like that in dreams where they might remember something that's already happened, or they might dream up a location that they've been to before, but it seems off. Now, while these malls don't have the same layout and don't look exactly alike, like a lot of malls, there are some similarities, and the aesthetic overall is sort of similar. It might be very possible that while he's hallucinating, he's coming back to thoughts of the other Valley View Mall, or possibly just something he's heard about the one in Texas, and is falling back on those while he's hallucinating. And of course, that might not be completely logical, but as with other kanepixel productions, it doesn't always matter if it's logical or not. If you've seen the back rooms, you know some of the entities that are encountered there. Or even the layout of the levels in general is just weird. So to come to this and be like, oh, well, that's not a realistic hallucination or thing to dream about. Well, I mean, nothing in this series or any other would be anyways. This is just the most logical thing that I can come up with and have it make sense real world. Another point of support for this theory that I want to touch on goes back to one of the major symptoms of Phosgene exposure, which is respiratory failure. Essentially, the tissue in your body is not receiving enough oxygen, and you can develop a condition like hypoxia. Now, this is important because one of the visual cues for hypoxia, or respiratory failure in general, is your fingertips and lips will start to turn a kind of shade of blue, and your skin will go pale and eventually lose color. It'll kind of take on like this gray tone. And I find this interesting given some of the other things that I believe allude to Phosgene, that at the end, after we see Wyatt fall to his death, that as the camera's panning away from his body, while the world itself remains saturated and colorful and green, that his body would be gray, a symptom of respiratory failure. I do want to note that in the first part, Julian also has this sort of desaturated gray tone about him. I can't really link the two of those together. You could say it's symbolic, I'm not really sure. But I did want to point out that Wyatt's skin and the desaturation is something consistent with something like respiratory failure. As far as Julian goes, he died of Bright's disease, which is a form of nephritis, and as far as I can tell, I don't think it would link directly to that. You could say that the gray tone represents death, and you could say that applies to both Wyatt and Julian, given that they both died, but that's all I've really got as to why he would be gray and desaturated. So the final piece of support actually comes from a commenter, Roman, from our last video, where he points out that whenever Wyatt's running around the mall, there's a couple different scenes where you've got like the glass paneling on the roof and you can see sunlight coming through. And it's a great point to make, because if this was fully underground, how would there be light coming through? We've seen that all the exits are covered up by rock, supposedly, and the other staircase that he first comes down is completely caved in. So I do find it odd that there would be sunlight there, unless either it wasn't fully submerged underground, or again, perhaps it's some type of hallucination. Another thing Roman pointed out was that later on, before Wyatt attempts to get to the emergency exit, he asks the giant what he wants. And whether it's the giant responding or the mall itself, you'll notice that it flickers and you've got the corpse of a horse and some bodies on the floor. And if you look down below as he's climbing up the beams to get to the exit, you'll notice more bodies down below. Now, what's interesting is that these bodies actually look like the mannequins from a store that was actually in the Valley View Mall before it was demolished. And it's some kind of like a military surplus store that sells like old World War I and II uniforms. And I do find it interesting that they would be in these uniforms given Phosgene's use in the First World War. So I think as far as support for the theory goes, I'd kind of like to end it there. I think it kind of adds like this twist of realism to Kane's project. And I think it's a great theory. I don't see a lot of other ones like this. Most of what gets touched on is more of like the meaning behind it, or like what it's supposed to represent. I just thought I'd try and do something realistic with it, make it work in real life. And I think I've done a decent job with that. Of course, there's going to be some holes here and there. It's not perfect, but I wouldn't want it to be perfect anyways. I'd hate to wake up tomorrow and have Kane comment on it and be like, yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. Because like in my mind, it kind of takes away, when you lose that meaning, it takes away some of the effect of what you just saw. So while I think it's interesting to discuss and bring up and kind of theorize on it, I'd much rather have this theory just be a theory. And, for the people that, for whatever reason, got upset on the last one about me trying to make it realistic, it's like, I'm not trying to take the fun away with it. I just didn't see anyone else doing it like this, and I thought I'd give it a shot. So anyways, you guys let me know what you think. I'd really like to keep doing these videos if this is the kind of content that people like. I still want to do some gaming stuff. I released a video a couple weeks ago that was gaming themed, and it did a little bit better than some of the previous ones. So I'd still like to do that sometimes, maybe just to fill in like the content gaps, because videos like this one do take a little bit more time for me to produce, and I've got to sit here for a couple hours a day and record and then cut out the stuff that I think doesn't work well. So let me know. And if there's other horror projects that you guys would like me to take a look at or do a theory for or break down or just discuss, give me some ideas. I'd love to start on something new next. I think as far as the oldest view goes, I think I'd like to end it here unless someone comes up with something else to discuss or that affects how the theory is. The other thing is, if Kane were to make another part to the oldest view or to add some more context to it, I could maybe make a video discussing that. But unless he were to do that, I don't see any reason to do another video on the oldest view. So yeah, if you've got any ideas, let me know. I'd like to hear them. I'd love to come up with something new and interesting to discuss and maybe do some theories over. So just to finish up, I want to thank everyone that's been watching so far. That last video hit 55,000 views, which is insane, because when I first published that video, I was thinking, maybe I'd get like a couple hundred. If I was really lucky, maybe like 1,000. But that, that's going to be pushing it. But right now we're sitting at 55,000, which is absolutely insane. And I think the subscriber count, I think when I first published it, I was at like 32 subscribers. Right now we're sitting at 660, which is just fantastic. I wasn't expecting that at all. The comment section's been mostly positive, which is great. I like good discussion, even if you don't agree with me. That's cool. Because, if you've got an extra opinion, toss it in there. I'd love to hear it. And I like critique. That's how you get better. So, just keep it positive, but don't be afraid to critique me if you've got something I can improve. Or maybe like something to add to my theory or anything else that I'm doing. But yeah, just, thanks guys. Because I was only going to continue making content if I thought it would do well. And it's far exceeded what I thought it would do. So I'd love to keep producing more videos like this. I wasn't so sure about doing horror-themed content, but if you guys like it, I'd love to keep doing it. So if you've got any ideas at all, I'll go ahead and leave the channel email in the description just so you can, maybe, email me an idea or some kind of request or anything like that. Because, I also do, amateur VA work. So if you've got a project you'd love to have me read or narrate or anything like that, hit me up too, because I'd love to do that. But yeah, let me know if you've got any ideas. I'll see you next time.